Welcome to the Military Matters Fast Take. I'm Rod Rodriguez.
I'm Jack Murphy.
Jack, your story on the death of Mark Leshikar is causing a real stir in the SOF community and within the veteran community itself. Lots of folks who weren't even aware of this story till you covered it at Connecting Vets a while back.
This story only came to my attention after Billy Levine and Tim Dumas were killed at Fort Bragg. I had no idea previously. That was when I started reaching out to family members.
For this Fast Take, Jack and I talk with a veteran of both the military and law enforcement for his perspective on this still unfolding story. What's crazy is we uncovered new details about this case just minutes before we did this interview.
This story has continued to evolve, and we continue to cover it here on Military Matters. To get some further insight onto this subject, we're going to talk to my friend Paul Ciolino. He's the president of the International Association of Forensic Criminologists.
My name is Paul Ciolino. I have been an investigator around 40 years now. I was in the Army for 7 years, was an MP, I was in the infantry. MP was far better. I never got wet or cold or hungry, but
So Jack tells me that you listened to our podcast about
yes.
the death of Mark Leshikar. I'd love to hear your initial impressions, coming off of that podcast. What were you left with? What was your takeaways? What were your thoughts?
Well, I'll tell you, I found the girls extremely credible in both their stories. I didn't detect an ounce of bullshit from either one of them. This is a tragedy, and I think Jack touched on it. I mean, I said this years ago, 20 plus years of war fighting, not good for our young men and young women, apparently, as well. Listen, the Army has all the problems the civilian world has, right? We got murder, we got drugs, we got sexual misconduct. It's always been there, will always be there. It's part of American society, just wearing the green uniform. And in this particular case, this guy gets murdered by his best friend for no obvious reason. So what does that leave? Usually drugs or alcohol is involved in some way, shape, or form. And I think there might be an abundance of it in this case.
What do you make of the disappearing screwdriver, which kind of so much of this case seems to hinge on?
Well, there is no screwdriver. It's bullshit. For whatever reason, listen, this is not a self-defense case. Not any way, shape, or form. Nobody fooled with a crime scene unless it was the guy who did the shooting. And I can tell you, somebody forgot to put a screwdriver there. If you're going to use self-defense, the guy better have something in his hand or nearby, i.e. baseball bat, axe, screwdriver, what have you. I'm guessing a Delta Force guy could handle his best friend with a screwdriver. So we're never going to know what happened here because everybody's dead. It wasn't self-defense. There was no screwdriver. The victim was assassinated, basically. There was no struggle. There was no fight. He walked in and he got drilled. He's laying on the floor and he got shot again. How do we notice? A bullet's recovered from underneath his body.
Prior to listening to the podcast, what did you know about this case? And when you listened to the podcast, how did that change?
Well, nothing's really changed except I find that it's nice to hear a couple of the witnesses talking. They're not eyewitnesses, but they're what we call occurrence witnesses, i.e. they had direct information on what was going on that day in these two guys' lives. And I think what I heard was the unvarnished truth from, let's call them what they are, they're victims. They're victims of what happened here. We got two dead guys who were not top 1% of our population, top 0.1% of the population. I mean, these are rock star soldiers by any metric, right? But clearly one of them had a serious problem. And he had a lot of clout. Let me tell you, when you're in the police station and your story's falling apart in a shooting, I don't give a shit who you are. You're not going anywhere. They had all the reason in the world to hold him and keep him on a murder charge.
That was kind of my next question, Paul. It's like, what do you make of the fact that they all that happens is they bring Billy down to the police station and a friend from his unit comes and picks him up. And that's kind of the end of it. A police sergeant writes a report that says it's a justifiable homicide, and that's the end of it. I mean, what do you make of that sequence of events there?
Well, Jack, that means Billy had some kind of clout, because there isn't a investigator worth of shit in the free world who would buy this story and let him walk out the door. Let's not forget the fact he's not giving a blood alcohol test or a drug test that day. If you get a serious car accident and somebody's injured, they're going to be giving you blood and alcohol test. Never mind if there's a remote possibility of criminal misconduct, you're going to get one. So this Billy is treated sort of like a guy who's got the get out of free jail card, whatever that may be. We don't know what Billy knows there, who he knows, who he's friends with, but I'm going to tell you something. That Sergeant Major walked into that police station and he walked out with Billy without a problem. So phone calls were made.
You know, you served as an MP yourself, and you've served as a criminal investigator for 40 years. Like, have you ever seen, let's just, say what we're thinking here. I guess inappropriate relationship between the military and local law enforcement?
Absolutely. I don't know, I'd call it inappropriate, but certainly they're generally pals, okay, and professionally aligned in most things. Are military guys going to get a break? Yeah, often. Are they going to get a break in a murder case? Pretty much never, okay, unless there's something afoot. And I mean higher-ups getting involved, the chief of police, the mayor, the head of the state police. Somebody makes a phone call and Billy walks out that door. And I can tell you something, there's some pissed off cop somewhere who hasn't said anything.
If you're an active duty service member, veteran, DoD civilian, or military family member, you can join Navy Federal. That means if you served in any branch of the military, doesn't have to just be the Navy, could be the Army, Marine Corps, Air Force, or Coast Guard, you can join the Navy Federal Credit Union. On average, Navy Federal members earn and save $361 more per year. You could pay no fees, get low rates and rate discounts, plus earn cash back and grow your savings. Navy Federal puts members first by helping them save money, make money, and enjoy peace of mind and security through personalized around-the-clock service. Plus, now is a great time to join. Have a large credit card balance after the holidays? Let Navy Federal Credit Union help you rebalance your priorities. Make a plan to do away with high-interest credit card debt by transferring your balance to a Navy Federal credit card. With a low intro APR and no balance transfer fees, you can pick the right card to help you take back control. Visit NavyFederal.org. Navy Federal Credit Union. Our members are the mission. And now the fine print. Insured by NCUA. Dollar value of Navy Federal's 2019 member give back study. 5.99 to 18% variable APRs based on product type and credit worthiness. Up to $1 cash advance transaction fee at non-Navy Federal ATMs. The forensic report, the coroner's report, I believe, indicated a very different story behind the shooting. And then at the very end of the podcast, the daughter reveals to her mother that she saw Uncle Billy standing over her father, and she heard more gunshots discharged. From a police officer's perspective, from your perspective, should they have been able to see that? Should it have been like the writing on the wall, like, hey, this guy was obviously shot while he was down? There's more to the story than what we're hearing. Listen,
they recover a bullet from underneath his body. From my perspective, physical evidence is everything. And sometimes we have a horrific lack of physical evidence for various reasons. The crime scene was mishandled. The people working the crime scene didn't know what they were doing. They blew it. They missed it. They didn't photograph it correctly. On and on. A bullet underneath the body, though, is indisputable evidence that the guy got shot while he's lying down. It didn't fall out of his body after he got shot. And they're fragments, which means what? It was a bullet that impacted something and shattered, which bullets have a tendency to do. And that's hardcore evidence that he shot while he's lying down, which translates into this guy's lying to us as to what happened. And why is he lying? Well, the general reason you lie is because I just committed a murder and I don't have a defense. So I'm going to make something up. Now we have the little girl coming clean after weeks or months. Let me tell you, if you're on a jury and that kid walks in the room and testifies to that, say goodbye to the defendant. He's gone. Adios. He's gone for life or the next 70 years.
I mean, I think that's some of the important points as far as the killing of Mark Leshikar. Although the question remains is motive. I would just put a point on that we don't really fully understand why Billy killed Mark. If Mark did not have a screwdriver, I mean that's a fact. That's just a physical fact of the case. So now we have to fill that gap. I mean, there has to be some sort of a reason here why Mark was shot and killed that day, and that's something we don't know. Maybe we'll never know. But Rod and I were working on something just this afternoon. Some new evidence kind of plopped right in our lap. Rod, I don't know where you want to pick it up. I'll just start with Rod has a source, and I have a second source, both of them confirming that Billy Levine did civilian skydiving with a parachute club called Paraclete XP in Rayford in North Carolina, right next to Fayetteville, right next to Fort Bragg. And the guy who worked on that parachute club and was a pilot there is now in jail for 40 years for smuggling. What is it, Rod? Is it methamphetamines?
Yes, methamphetamines.
Yeah.
High grade methamphetamine. Like I think that needs to be, and I think that's a very important part of that narrative, is that we're not talking about some cooked up junk from a trailer park.
Right.
In the court documents, they asked the police officer what type of methamphetamines he responded with high grade, 95% pure.
Well, I mean, it's coming right from the source.
Yeah, apparently it was. It's coming from the Sinaloa cartel.
Yeah,
the court
that would be
documents.
the source for that sort of drug in North America.
He was picking it up. It mentions Las Vegas, and it also mentions that he was picking up drugs in Columbus, Georgia, which is the home of what's right next door, Fort Benning.
Huge. Well, sure, infantry schools there, right? So, I mean, Fort Benning is one of the largest military posts in the United States. Listen, you are who you keep company with. I don't know what the connection is between these two guys, other than they belong to a club together, but it's certainly worth exploring further.
Yes, I will also point out that according to my sources, who have spoken publicly already, Mark's family, they know that, Mark and Billy were both involved in illicit substances, specifically cocaine. But they also have, said that Billy was involved with the opiates, something that Mark was not willing to do because he had a family member who is addicted to opiates, and he just stated he didn't want anything to do with that. But apparently Billy was involved, and there are allegations, at least I would call them rumors more than anything at this point, that Billy was in Billy's killing on Fort Bragg had something to do with the drug trade.
Well, it's certainly suspicious, and it sounds like it. And he's killed with a guy who has no connection to Billy's military unit, right, or Fort Bragg for that matter. And they're killed at Fort Bragg in the woods together. And they're not just merely killed; they're basically assassinated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this guy Thackley, who had a job out at this parachute club, out at this airfield. We don't quite know the whole scheme of maneuver, but it seems that he may have been flying the drugs around. That seems quite probable, all things considered. But he was storing the drugs inside his hangar, and he was selling them to people in North Carolina, to like street dealers. And a whole group of them, like 20 people, got rolled up by law enforcement. It's all things considered, it just seems like there's just too many coincidences here at this point.
There's a lot of bad stuff going on in this case.
Yeah.
A lot of ugly, bad stuff. The military certainly would not want to come to light. Now, of course, they got a problem because these two guys are killed on a military base. And what have they done about it? And what have they released? And we don't know anything about their investigation or where they're looking or if it's even open. They'll say it's open, so they're not forced to give up records of any sort.
Right.
But clearly, no one's working it.
Let's assume that nobody's investigating this, which I doubt. I really do I feel like somebody's investigating.
Well, and FBI is involved now too.
Yes, the FBI just got involved, and Jack and I were talking earlier. This is most likely because, we're talking about cross state lines. So Tim Thacker is a plane pilot, right?
Right.
This guy's flying back and forth, delivering drugs. He's like our aerial Santa Claus for methamphetamines. Now he rolls over. It's obvious from the court documents that he's giving up names. He's doing all this stuff, but he's not talking about anyone in the military, to our knowledge. We have not been able to identify anybody in that list as being an active service member. Why would this guy not roll over on a Delta guy or special forces guy or a military person if that meant he could get a reduced sentence, or, he's doing it to other folks? Why not other people?
You got to know what the relationship between them are. Are they close friends? Are they acquaintances? Are they guys that see each other once every 2 or 3 months? Or are they rat partners that are hanging out together all the time? And rats don't want to give up their closest friends. They'll give up people they don't know. They'll give up people they've had little contact with. They'll give up, and eventually they may give up their best friend if they're forced to. So we don't know what the relationship between them was, but it's highly suspicious that these guys are all connected. I mean, when did he plead guilty or wind up getting locked up for this?
Right around the time of Leshikar's death.
So presumably he didn't give him up in that investigation, but that doesn't mean he wasn't talking about him to other people, right? Leshikar and the other guy who gets killed at Fort Bragg.
Well, Billy Levine and Tim Dumas killed at Bragg, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure Leshikar has any connection to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Billy, we could assume Billy might have a connection because he's in that club. And that guy flies for that club, right?
Right.
And the guy that gets killed with Billy, what's his connection to the club?
So Timothy Dumas is a retired CW3 with a background in logistics, specifically logistics within SOF. Now, what we discovered was that Dumas actually had an LLC called Divine Properties of Carthage, started back in 2018, dissolved in 2020 after inactivity. To our knowledge, we haven't been able to find any legitimate Divine Properties. He registered it to one address in Pinehurst, but there's also another address associated with it down in Carthage. And when you look at that address, it's like a warehouse. There's two addresses that it could be. Either it's a really nice, well-maintained home, or a warehouse next to a bunch of storage units.
Right.
That's the one that kind of stuck out to me as being somewhat suspicious. But you've got Dumas with what looks like a shell company. He created an LLC. We don't see it doing much of anything over 2 years. And then he just so happens to be found dead with William Levine, both executed. I mean, there's a lot of conjecture, a lot of roads we can go down, but
Dumas had pending charges, right, Rod? I mean,
yes, that's right. Yeah. Why is this guy with a company that does or does not exist operate in this illegal environment? And then I would also I'll toss it back to Thacker again. In the legal documents, Thacker alludes to, he said, we can move around property in order to cover the debts. Now, I don't know exactly what that means. I'm not really sure about they don't really go into detail about what that operation looks like, but I found it interesting and relevant that we're talking about Thacker specifically talking about moving properties to pay for drugs. And we've got a dead veteran, what appears to be a property shell company. That seems like a connection. I don't think I'm going too far into the world of speculation to connect those two.
Well, here's the problem. We don't have access to anybody's email, phone, text messages. I can tell you one thing, drug dealers love using real estate companies, flip companies as a front to move money around in. I mean, you got to move the money around, right, guys? I mean, the hardest thing for a successful drug dealer is hiding his assets, because a $13 an hour bank teller could literally bring the weight of the government down on top of your ass with one bad deposit. You know what I'm saying? You walk in there and you drop $9,500 in the bank. You're under the 10,000 reporting factor, but you do this 2 or 3 times, and you got a little teller who goes, I don't like the look of this guy. And he calls the FBI, local FBI office, starts looking at this guy and finds this shell company that's not doing anything. And this guy making huge cash deposits. And now the game's afoot, because the first thing they're going to do is pick up the phone and go, come on down for a chat. We want to talk to you about your currency reporting problems. And if you don't come down, we're going to come get you. So you either show up with a lawyer and shut your mouth, or you go down there and you try to explain away your business.
Let's look at this case of Levine.
Yeah.
In Levine's case, he was detained. They had the ability to press charges. They had the ability to charge him with murder, but
Absolutely.
they didn't. Somebody told him to walk, so he walks. Even then, you've been involved in a shooting. And my understanding was even before that, there was other things going on. In our podcast, the CID investigator said he was under the impression that Levine was supposed to have been chaptered out. He was supposed to be gone. The family was under the impression this guy was chaptered out of the Army, and he wasn't. Now, we have no proof as to who said you can stay in the military. That CID agent said it had to have come from somebody up there in the secretary of the Army level to keep this guy in service. If that came to light, Paul, how does that affect your perspective? What does that do to your understanding of that relationship between law enforcement and the military?
My rose-colored glasses fell off many, many years ago. Okay, nothing shocks or surprises me. The best thing that ever happened in the military is Levine got himself killed. We don't have to deal with this problem anymore.
Yeah.
Right? He's dead. We don't have to deal with it. There's not a reason to deal with it. Don't care. Short of a major congressional inquiry as to what happened, them are the only people that can really get to the bottom of it, that have the power, the money, and the clout to do it. And they're not going to do it. For whatever reason, this thing's dead in the water. So we're going to talk about it till the cows come home, but there's never going to be resolution to this case, ever. Not going to happen.
So I want to make sure I'm clear. You don't think anything's going to come from this anymore? Do you think this is dead? Do you think that we'll never know the truth?
There's a 90% chance as we're sitting here right now, we know all we're ever going to know about it today. That's it.
Jack, what do you think? I've got Paul. Paul seems like he's just lost his faith in humanity. Paul is just like, this is not going to happen. 90% chance. But you kind of broke this story, Jack, with your original article at Connecting Vets. Where do you think this is leading? Do you think we will? Do you think there's a chance for us to get the truth?
Hey, Rob, before Jack answers, let me just say this. Who else has done anything about this except Jack Murphy?
Here, Rod and Stars and Stripes and, the family members, Mark's mother and sister speaking out and Mark's widow. But yeah, other than that, not so much. I think that one of the things that should be pointed out in case it isn't abundantly clear is the killings of William Levine and Timothy Dumas are being investigated as a homicide, according to Army CID. This is what they told me. So that tells us that there is a third party out there. There is a murderer on the loose. That may be the next thing that comes out of this story. If FBI is involved, I have to believe that they're trying to locate who killed these two people. A double murder on Fort Bragg. I have to think that they're probably going to pursue that. And I hope they do make an arrest and that justice is served for those two service members. As far as, the case with Mark, unfortunately, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. And I have to agree with Paul. It's like the perfect conspiracy at this point, because with Billy Levine dead, there's really no other party to hold accountable for it.
I think we're going to find something. I don't know what it is, but
you guys might find a whole bunch of stuff. Is anybody going to act on it?
That's the question, isn't it?
Rod, do you want to talk, this is backtracking a little bit, but do you want to talk about Jens for a moment?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Paul, another piece of information in this, in the death of Mark Leshikar, is that Billy and Mark had a mutual friend who's a sergeant major in Delta Force. And this person is allegedly, he received the first phone call from Billy. Billy told him that Mark killed himself. So the sergeant major is driving down to Billy's residence and receives a second phone call, and Billy's already changing his story, saying, no, actually, he didn't kill himself. Now, we know from Laura, from Mark's widow, this sergeant major arrives at the house, secures Mark's cell phone from the scene, and gives it back to Laura several days later. Says, oh, by the way, here's Mark's cell phone. Another weird thing that happened with the sergeant major was when the sister, right, Rod? It was Nicole. Nicole, Mark's sister, is talking to the sergeant major about all of this, and he remarks to her, what was the exact quote? Do you want to play it, Rod?
By that point, her and Gents were already on the way to Billy's house. And then I got a call from Mallory, maybe 30 minutes later, 40 minutes later, that she couldn't get through, that there was a police blockade, that Gents was there. Gents, at this point, he hadn't returned any of my calls until the following morning. But from my understanding, well, what he told me when he called me the next day was that he was too close to the situation and that he needed things to, he needed to make sure his work side was before he touched base with me.
He needed to touch, so he didn't even talk to her till the next day. He went silent, went dark, and then when he does talk to her, he tells her, I'm too close to the situation, and I need to get my work side together before he could touch base with her again.
Listen, if you guys think for 1 second that Gents went out to this shooting scene without contacting his higher-ups and letting them know what was going on, trust me, no sergeant major in the United States Army is going to insert himself into a murder case, especially if you're from Delta Force, without making phone calls and getting instructions. Because here's your instructions: go out there and fix this shit, find out what's going on, or stay the hell away. It's none of our business. It happened off post. I want nothing to do with it. That would be his direction, okay?
And while that's happening, they're sending the red flag up the chain of command going, shit's about to hit the fan.
Right. So Johnson sent out there to A, find out what's going on, and B, let's minimize the damage and exposure here. Number one, he grabs a guy's phone who's a murder victim and holds it. That's tampering with evidence. That generally get you locked up anywhere else in the world. The police find out you took the victim's phone, held on to it for a few days, and then gave it back to his civilian sister. You might get indicted for that one. I don't think he grabbed anyone's phone without anyone's permission, and it was the old top secret materials on here. I'm sorry, gentlemen, you're not authorized. We'll check it out and give it back to you.
Paul, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk with me and Jack. I can tell you, I greatly appreciate your firsthand insight as a professional, as a veteran, as a law enforcement guy. You definitely speak with honesty and candor, and I think that's amazing. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
Yeah, really appreciate it, Paul. Thank you. Some great insight from Paul and some kind words. I've known him for a while now, and he kind of downplays his value as an investigator. This is a guy who has investigated death row inmates and had them exonerated and released from prison because they were innocent. This dude is the real deal. Leave us a review and a 5-star rating on whatever podcast player you use. Those reviews really help us reach new audiences. And be sure to share this podcast. We grow through word of mouth. You can find Military Matters everywhere you listen to podcasts, or go to stripes.com and click on the podcast tab. We're always free to listen to. Use the promo code PODCAST, PODCAST, and save 50% on your digital subscription to Stars and Stripes. Follow me on Twitter at JackMurphyRGR, and follow Rod Rodriguez at RodPodRod.
This episode was written and produced by Rod Rodriguez and Jack Murphy, executive produced by Joe Fleming. Special thanks to our guest, Paul Ciolino. Make a plan to do away with high-interest credit card debt by transferring your balance to a Navy Federal Credit Union credit card. With a low intro APR and no balance transfer fees, you can pick the right card to help you take back control. Visit NavyFederal.org. Navy Federal Credit Union. Our members are the mission. I'm Rod Rodriguez.
I'm Jack Murphy.
We'll see you at the next episode.